Well, welcome in to another special edition of the Big Ten Huddle. I am your host, Zach Guggenheim, and with me tonight or this morning, whenever you're listening, I've got one of our viewers and a well-connected man within Penn State, Chris, the Penn State guy, joining us to talk Penn State football. Chris, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, man. I'm excited to hear some of what you got to say, Chris. You've been a longtime viewer and listener, and uh, often are bringing in some very pristine nuggets about the Nittany Lions, and so I'm excited to hear kind of what you're hearing about what kind of happened, how this all unfolded with James Franklin, and then obviously where they go from here. Um, Maybe we'll just kind of get right into it. Chris, what have you been hearing just as all that's transpired the past 48 hours?
So this is what I'll tell you. I had a huge nugget dropped on me about an hour ago from one of my contacts that's been pretty reliable. If this red shirt gives you an indication of who the next head coach is going to be, it should. So I was
Hmm.
told he will not announce it publicly. He's not going to leave mid-season, but I was told it's pretty much going to be Matt Rule. Um, I don't think a lot of your viewers, though, realize how close the connection Matt Rule is with Penn State's athletic director, Pat Kraft. Now, I just want to premise this by saying nothing is 100%. Don't hold me to it. But for right now, I think it's almost going to be a done deal that it's Matt Rule. Who knows what could change over the next month, over the next few weeks, if there's some huge big name coach that all of a sudden shows interest, bigger than Matt Rule. But from what I was told, it's going to be Matt Rule. Won't be announced publicly because Matt Rule's not going to disrespect Nebraska like that. He won't announce it publicly. Pat Kraft and Matt Rule's relationship is deeper than just a business relationship where he was the coach at Temple and Pat Kraft was at the athletic director or in the athletic department. Their families are extremely close. Like they have stayed connected and they have a deep like family connection. Like they are very extremely close. And do you know where Matt Rule played high school football at? By any chance,
He,
just off the top of your head, I'm not.
it was in Pennsylvania, right?
State College.
So he's a state high grad.
He played high school football at State College in where Penn State's at.
Yeah.
So and I just think it's he's gonna have the opportunity to go back to where not just where he's an alumni from, but it's his own hometown, where he grew up, where his roots are, and he's going to have a chance to have, be, in no disrespect to Nebraska or other programs, but he's going to have a chance to have a recruiting footprint in the DMV area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, where it's, in a program that's a little higher up right now. Well, maybe not right now, but in general over the recent years than what Nebraska was. He's never had that. I'm not saying Matt Rule's the answer and everything's going to just fall into place and he's the savior. I have no idea how he's going to be. But if he is the head coach, people got to realize it's Penn State. He's not coaching at Temple. He's not coaching at Baylor, where he did a pretty good job, but obviously didn't have the talent. Now, what I was told is, and I was even told this after the UCLA game, I was told if Pat Kraft, the AD, if it's all his say, which it is, it's definitely going to be Matt Rule. I was told options number 2 were Matt Campbell and Mike Elko. Mike Elko, I'd have a hard time. I'd love Mike Elko, but I don't see how he'd leave A&M, and that, he has a pretty good thing going on there. And, obviously they got a ton of money, and Texas is as good of a recruiting state as you could get.
Mm-hmm.
But that's pretty much what I am hearing right now. James Franklin, like the reason for his firing is pretty obvious. I mean, he pretty much imploded. You could just see he's a broken down man at this point. He asked the athletic department he asked them for all this money for resources. He asked them all this money to bring in Jim Knowles and Coddle Mickey. They gave him everything he wanted. And he all this, not that they have a ton of NIL, but it's better than what people realize. all the NIL money they use, so much of it he used to retain these players and bring back Drew, Nick Singleton, Katron, all these guys, and it didn't work out. After you give this guy everything he wants and his team implodes and things don't work out like it should in these 3 straight losses, I just think, Pat Kraft don't mess around. He's like, listen, we gave you everything and it didn't work out. Time to move on. Also, there was some tension between them, Pat Kraft and James Franklin. It was never going to be made publicly. In the summertime, sure, Franklin asked Pat Kraft for a 5-year extension, and Pat Kraft turned him down. And since then, there was some tension, and there's also some tension and a big disagreement of how between Kraft and Franklin of how James Franklin handled his NIL. Like the 2026 class, I'm big with recruiting. It imploded at the end. In June, when it was crunch time, they had 5 top targets still out there: Cary Adams, Joey O'Brien, who's from Pennsylvania. Cary Adams is a top corner, Damari Simeon, Luke Wafel. And Franklin's NIL usage, he never wanted to give a lot of money to incoming recruits. He would get more aggressive than what he usually does. But I was at NIL events where these NIL guys would straight up say, oh, we don't really go after 5 stars that much. They come with too much of a high price tag and they're unproven. And I'm just sitting there thinking, how could you ask donors for money when you're not going to use their money to the fullest extent? And Pat Kraft had an issue with that. He had a serious issue with that. And that is why, another reason why Franklin is gone. It was his usage of NIL. Instead of using it to bring back to go get some top recruits, he just wanted to just keep using it for retention. And it didn't work out. And here we are.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. So let me just maybe recap a couple things that you were saying there, Chris. One, it sounds like they're really targeting Matt Rule. That seems very clear, and that Matt Campbell is kind of a plan B, Mike Elko a plan B, but really it's Matt Rule or bust, it feels like. And then the other thing,
from my understanding, yes.
Okay. And then it sounds like the other thing, and I think this is what I felt, but I didn't have confirmation, but it seems like the firing, it's really not just about the losses. It's about the breakdown of relationships, and that there is maybe a desire to change philosophy, both on the field, but also in recruiting.
Correct. It was both of it. It was more so the losses. Like if Franklin's philosophy worked, where retaining all these guys and spending all this money on guys worked, he would still be here. But it imploded and it didn't work. So it was just a combination of things.
Yeah. Yeah. The things that he wanted to do did not yield. And obviously if you're Pat Kraft, and you're like, you asked for everything, it didn't work. We're going to go like, it makes sense. I think as you kind of think about the whole picture, it's like, I don't agree with how you're doing it. It didn't work. It's time to move on.
Yes. That's pretty much it.
Gotcha.
The losses, it just killed them. And, some of the things with James Franklin, it was his inability to change. Like he was just so stubborn, and set in his ways. Like, I know when you got a 5-star quarterback like Drew Aller coming in, it's hard to make a decision to go with a guy like Boo Probola instead. But Mike Elko had Connor Wiegman, who was just highly ranked as Drew and was like a 5-star himself, and it wasn't working out. He benched him, went with Marcel Reed, and it was the right move. Franklin, he didn't have the guts to make those moves. I mean, and what was crazy is like you have Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Besides saying Drew Aller's not the guy, and I recognize how I kept saying, I know I beat a dead horse, how it wasn't all the receivers. I kept saying that. I also said in high school, because I'm pretty good at player evaluations, I used to write player evaluations for Rivals. I said in high school, Nick Singleton does not have elusiveness. He's not good at making guys miss. And you go into these games, Going into the Oregon game, Nick Singleton had averaged 3 yards a carry. Katron Allen averaged 7 yards a carry. And he's still splitting carries with them. Like, he's still almost doing a 50-50 carry share. Now, any head coach, anybody with half a brain could see, listen, one guy has the hot hand, the other guy, it's just not working. So after they lose to Oregon, he comes out with UCLA. He gives Nick Singleton, and against Oregon, Nick Singleton averaged 1 yard, like 1.9 yards a carry. Katron averaged 4.5 or something. Then he goes to UCLA and he gives Nick Singleton 11 carries, and then he gives Katron like 7 or 8. Like, hello? And it's just mind-boggling how he's so stuck in his ways. And the other thing was the receivers. I knew these, not just because of Drew Aller, but I knew these transfer receivers were overrated. Kyron Hudson is just a slow possession guy that can't separate. Devontae Ross is the only one worth anything that's decent. Trevor Pena, his production was masked by Syracuse throwing the ball 1,000 times a game last year. You know, Trevor Pena is just an average receiver. He's not fast. He's not a burner. He's just a good route runner, but he doesn't have good speed to separate. So they have guys, and when I was on with JR preseason, I mentioned Tyser Denmark. They have a true freshman, Kobe Howard. These guys were talked about all in camp, lighting it up and how good they look, and he won't give these guys a shot. Like, he's just set in his ways. Now, I'm not saying Kobe Howard is Ohio State-like type receivers, but they're that good. And if you think about Penn State's offense, the defense is a whole other issue. But if you think of their offense, what would you label them? Like, they don't have an offensive identity, you know? So, like, you think of Michigan and Harbaugh. Remember the middle of Harbaugh's reign at Michigan? They brought in Josh Gaddis. They tried to go to a spread offense. It didn't work. Harbaugh realized that. Harbaugh's DNA, his bread and butter, is power run, pro set style offense. He was done trying to incorporate a spread offense. He went to his bread and butter that worked. You look at it at spread off, then you look at guys like Josh Heupel at Tennessee, Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss. They're predominantly spread offenses where they're not trying to be power run. They're not trying to be Michigan. They're doing one thing that is their bread and butter that they're comfortable with. Penn State was trying to be part power run, part spread, part RPO. And it just wasn't working. They don't have an offensive identity. And that was a huge issue. This vaunted offensive line that everybody thought was going to be so good. Everybody has a short memory. So the offensive line caught fire in the postseason last year in the 4 games. They played great. But what people don't realize is 2024 regular season Big Ten play, they weren't good. They averaged like 3 yards a carry in Big Ten play in the regular season. So, you know, people kind of jumped the gun with this offensive line. It was, you know, they just happened to catch fire, and 2 of the teams was SMU and Boise State. The defensive, I'm just going through the reasons why everything imploded. Jim Knowles' defense, God, do I miss Manny Diaz? But we lost two defensive tackles. Zane Durant's back. Kazai Izzard and Devon Ellies, who changed his name to Devon J. Thomas, were like pretty much 2 starting defensive tackles. And the linebackers were Kobe King, a big thumper in the middle, solid middle linebacker, and Tony Rojas. Now, these guys are getting pushed all over the place. Our linebackers are a huge downgrade, and the defensive tackles are just not holding up at the point of attack. And it's just the snowball effect of everything. And the craziest thing with Franklin, how crazy is this? He had a bye week before the Oregon game. And I don't know if I guess he does this in every bye week. They have an unusual practice schedule. Like, even regardless of the bye, if they have a game on Saturday, instead of having Sunday off and starting things up again on Monday, he goes right back to practice on Sunday and will give him Monday off. Now, he had a bye week. The whole first week of the bye week, they didn't practice. They didn't prepare. This is Landon Tangwall, former player, has a podcast and said this. They
Yep.
did nothing the whole first week of the bye week. James Franklin was flying around on his helicopter, going to visit guys that already committed, just were watching their games mainly. So how could you, as a head coach, with the biggest game of the year coming up, not be with your team using that extra week to prepare for Oregon? This is what he does. And then after
Yep.
that loss, he has this love them up philosophy. Starts with I love you, ends with I love you. He knew his team was going to be down and out. He knew his team was ripe for a letdown going versus UCLA, and he did nothing. He did nothing to make sure that would be prevented and his team would be, not be right mentally, that you still have the whole season in front of you. He's a broken man. He's a
Yeah.
broken man.
I appreciate you even using the words he's a broken man, because I think even just what you described, Chris, is I think it's really easy to look at it just in the one instance and say, oh, they lost to UCLA, they lost to Northwestern, and like that's why. But I appreciate even every small thing that went into this implosion. It's not just one thing, it was thing after thing after thing after thing. And I think James Franklin relationally with Kraft, but also I think his inherent stubbornness, which I think we've talked about on our show, and I think you've referenced in the chat several times. I think all of that came to a head, and we ended up getting to where we're at, and it's sad. Like, I feel for James Franklin, but you are paid to adapt, and I think in a very similar situation, I think fans felt similarly with Ryan Day. And then he did change. Like, that was, I think, the main difference is people were like, why didn't you open up the offense? And then you get to Tennessee and it's like, oh, okay, cool. You listened to us. And now you weren't getting
Yeah.
that from James Franklin.
Right. In a good point of Ryan Day compared to of what you're talking about compared to James Franklin, and you would know this better than I did. Like watching Zach Smith's podcast, the first time last year when you played Oregon, the first time lost a close game, it was reported Ryan Day went to Jim Knowles, said your play sheet is too big, it's too complex. You got to get on the ball, make things simpler. You got to get this fixed. And he did. And you look what he did in the Big Ten, or excuse me, in the Rose Bowl. Like, that is what a good coach does. That is what a coach with guts does. And James Franklin just, it's not only that he didn't do it. It's, I don't think he knew how to do it.
Yeah.
There's this big argument on the message boards about whether Franklin meddled in the offense or that he didn't meddle. Listen, I think meddling is what you leave your coordinators alone. You let them, if they're worth their salt, you let them do their thing. But when things aren't going right, it is your job as a head coach to step in and get things fixed. And I don't think he even knew how to. I really don't.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point, because like we say, you don't want to meddle in people, like in like the offense. That was a big thing for years. It's like, oh, James Franklin's meddling, but you need to meddle. Like he needed to meddle with Kotelnicki's offense, right? Like it was not working with Drew Aller. Right. And so I think you make a great point there. Let me transition us real quick. I'll get you out of here on this. You mentioned Matt Rule as a Penn State, or as the Penn State guy, I should say. How do you, as a fan and as an evaluator, react if that ends up happening?
I think there's better candidates out there, but I would give him a fair shake. I want it's so hard to judge because he never had the talent he's going to have at Penn State, and it's just so hard to judge. Like you look at Fickle did a great job in Cincinnati, not working in Wisconsin. It's just so hard to judge. Now, at Temple, he took over. Year one was a bad year. It was like 2 and something. Year two at Temple Rule, it was like a 500 type team, 6-6, something like that. Year three, he went like 9-3 with them. That's incredible to do at Temple. And it was a 3-year rebuild. At Baylor, it was the same thing. Year one wasn't great. Year two was like a 7-5 or something like that record. Year three at Baylor, I think he finished the regular season with one loss. I've seen some boneheaded things Matt Rule has done. I don't remember exactly, but some head scratching things he's done in some games where he lost some games he shouldn't. I honestly haven't watched enough of him, but I think he has a history of being able to turn programs around. So I think the theory is, if you could turn around Temple, now who knows? I don't think the best coaches in the world are going to make Temple into a regularly successful program football wise. But if you could turn around Temple, you could go 11-1 regular season with Baylor. I think he could probably do pretty good at Penn State. That's the theory. I can't sit here and say I know how good it's just too hard for me to say at the moment. One thing I will say I definitely don't want that we might get is his defensive coordinator is John Butler. John Butler was the defensive coordinator when Bill O'Brien was here.
Mm-hmm.
That guy was bad. That guy was bad. And I remember reading Nebraska message boards going into the season, and I remember guys talking a lot about John Butler, how he's promising to be more aggressive and all this. Promising to be you've been coaching forever, man. I don't understand how any defensive coordinator does not have an aggressive attacking style of defense. I get you can't always just line up and go all out, especially if you're undermanned and you don't have the talent to man up with a team. But I don't see how any defensive coordinator doesn't have a Manny Diaz attack style philosophy. I don't know what Jim Knowles does, but it's not a fit. He doesn't have the personnel at Penn State. I mean, you got running backs that are 4 yards down the field before they were even touched. It's bad. It's bad. But he had the personnel at Ohio State. Like, I know you guys weren't really big on him hearing you, but, Sonny Styles and the other linebacker, Cody Simon, they're a lot better than what Penn State has at linebacker. He made it work, and Caleb Downs is the best defender in football. So,
yeah. And I think it's weird because we certainly have our criticisms of Knowles. He certainly was good, but yes. I think the thing, and I think you've mentioned it, and I think it's something that, the best way to put it, I think, is his scheme is complex. He's kind of a mad scientist. And the problem with a mad scientist is if you don't grasp the concepts, you're too slow because you don't know what you're actually supposed to do. And I think you're seeing 100%. That at Penn State. I think you saw it in moments, even in year 3 at Ohio State. I think that's why Ryan Day got involved. It's not that he's not a terrible defensive coordinator, but he's had some bad moments this year. And right. I think if you're kind of paying attention, you could have known that some of it would have happened. I don't know if we would have said it would have been this bad, right? I don't think we were thinking Griffin Wilde was going to be catching a 50-yard touchdown pass down the side, right?
Yeah, it's a mess, man. I mean, that's one thing I've kept telling Penn State buddies and people on the message boards. There's so many sunshine pumpers that don't want to hear it. It's like the Kool-Aid drinkers don't like me on the message boards, but I don't care about it. So, but you guys I've listened to other Ohio State podcasts, every single Ohio State guy, before Knowles came to Penn State, after Knowles came to Penn State, they all said it takes a good year or two even to really learn his system where you're not thinking and you could play fast. And that has definitely, I think, also came up with Penn State. And there's even been talks about it where they're thinking too much and not playing fast. But I mean, I don't know. It's just a perfect storm of everything that just snowballed out of control. So It is what it is. On to bigger and better things, and we'll see what happens. And I mean, they're already losing recruits, decommitting and stuff, but that comes with the territory. That's part of, when you lose a head coach, that's what happens.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, my hope is that Terry Smith at least can bring back at least some semblance and rally this team. I'm a Buckeye through and through, but I have a really deep there's a part of my heart that's very, very empathetic towards Penn State because I've lived here. I did
Yeah,
ministry in State College for a while, and so I hope that it turns around a bit this season. Not November 1st, but other than that, I'm hoping it turns around for Penn
I don't
State.
think you
But
guys have anything to worry about November
yeah, well,
1st.
that's crazier things have happened, but
This is true. This is
yeah.
true.
But
I
Chris,
will say Terry Smith is a beloved guy. Like, the one thing with James Franklin is his players loved him. He was a players coach through and through. They loved him. And Terry Smith is a players guy, and he's just he's very warm. He's down to earth. But the thing is, I think he has more guts. I think he's going to hold more people accountable.
would
Just
be
like a
good.
little tidbit, like a little small thing. How we talk about someone posted like today that when Franklin was the coach, that like players would when they would go to class, they'd usually get a ride on a golf cart or scooter or some crap. All of a sudden today, they're all walking to class. The scooters, the golf carts are gone. Like, I think that's just part of accountability. He made the decision. AJ Harris, who's supposed to be this great corner, he got burned verse in Northwestern. I don't know, was their first touchdown. He pulled them immediately. Like, there was just a lack of leadership on the team too. And the whole love them up attitude, when you need leadership, you got to do better than that.
Yep. Yep.
So
Well,
we'll
Chris,
see.
I appreciate you coming on and giving us the inside scoop. Is there a way to follow you either on Twitter or on message boards, places that we can find you?
I don't really. I mean, I'm an on three message board. I under the name Tony Bender, but I don't have. I don't post or do this. Like, I don't make shows or doing. But well, here's where you can follow me a little bit. Actually, I would like to give a shout out to the Mark Lesko podcast. Those guys started asking me coming on. It's Mark Lesko. He's all Penn State, and he covers the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're good guys. Mark's a good guy. He has a co-host, Brett. I was actually just on with them before I came on with you. So Mark Lesko podcast is where you could find me. I don't have my own show, or I don't do stuff on Instagram, Twitter. I'm just a regular fan. I work too much to be able to do all that stuff, but that's where you can find. Honestly, man, I've gone from basically wake up in the morning 9:30. I'm a blue collar guy. I wake up 9:30 in the morning. I have an hour drive to work, and it's just like pretty much from 9:30, 10 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. I'm tied up. But Mark Lesko podcast, give him a sub, give him a shout out. I started going on with them. They're good guys, and that's pretty much it.
Cool. So the Mark Lesko podcast, and obviously, whenever you see the Penn State guy in our chat, that's Chris, and he knows what he's
That's
talking about. So we
Thank
appreciate
you.
you, Chris. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. You guys got a great show. Anything I could do to support you, I'm here.
I appreciate it. To the rest of you, good night.
All right. Have a good night, guys. Take care.